Were the vortex of the Earth's force to break, the Earth would be precipitated into dissolution under ordinary conditions. But were the Earth's force to be in the force of another planet, then the Earth would be precipitated as a globe to such a planet. Such is the case as regards double stars, triplets, quadruplets, especially when they are in contact. This same principle holds in regard to the forces of some nebulae and comets. One is frequently swallowed up by the other. In the case of double stars and triplets and so on, if conjoined, the centre of gravitation, so called, is not to each other, but to the intervening centre between them. The polarity of such a group is as to the force. Think not, however, that double stars or triplets or quadruplets are the limits of combinations in one force. There are clusters of planets, hundreds of them, thousands, and even millions, that sometimes occupy one force. As a globe can be annihilated, so can a force, and so can power, for none of these things of themselves are things in fact, but combinations in some given place or condition. But the physical expression of such known forms and figures and motions cannot be annihilated. Though the general form of a force is, as stated in its beginning, like a vortex, funnel-shaped, and we see in a whirlwind, its ultimate is towards a globular form. And though the current of a force is spiral at first, its currents results happen in the regions where they overlap one another and break up to a limited extent, producing discord in motion. Certain eddies and whirlpools result, and the physical substance in solution is condensed, like little planets or meteoric stones, varying in size from a pin's head to 20, 30 miles in diameter, and the little broken currents in the force lose their prey, and the meteoric stones or little planets are carried by the force current down to the Earth's surface. The belt in the atmosphere where these things happen is usually about 5 or 6 or 700 miles up from the Earth's surface, but the belt sometimes ascends 1,000 miles. But at other distances upward, other belts exist and others still beyond, and so on. Another result that happens from these overlapping currents in the force is the production of rain and snow and hail. Certain parts of the earth are given to snow, certain parts to rain and hail, and other parts to drought. In drought regions, the force overlappings descend to the very earth, where they are called by various names, such as cyclones, whirlwinds, and so on. But if they occur on the ocean, carrying either up and down a current of water, they are termed waterspouts. In regions where there is rain, hail, and snowfalls, the force, commotion, takes place from 1/2 mile to 3 miles above the Earth's surface. Here the discord results in liberating the moisture, transparent so it was in solution, and clouds result. But if the commotion continue, these are atomically still further liberated, and either rain or snow or hail results, which is carried down to the earth. The places in the force of the Earth where these discords result are nearly uniform in their relative distance from the Earth, and in the times of their occurrence having special reference to the prophetic periods previously given. Take for example the forms and figures of snowflakes. These are not all, but there are thousands and millions of them, differing so much from one another that description is impossible. As previously stated, physical substance being in solution in ether has in the main the shape of needles, but of such infinitesimal size that physical knowledge of them can ultimately toward less spiraling. If one could imagine a very long serpent's spiral form constantly turning its head at one pole and its tail at the other, and forever crawling upon its own self spirally, such a view would somewhat illustrate the currents of a force. Were the currents of the force to attain due east and west lines without polar outcropping, the winds would cease to blow on the face of the earth. The air in the earth would ultimately be in equilibrium and axial revolution. Here lies the cause of the winds chiefly. Nevertheless, high mountain regions of irregular forms and places on the earth's surface add considerably to breaking and changing the currents that would otherwise result. The transcendent heat of the tropical atmosphere would seem to call for replacement for north and south by cold currents of wind. But it must be remembered that only a few miles up from the earth the temperature of the tropical air is as low as the polar air. Only so far as icebergs float towards the equator is there any very perceptible lowering of the temperature of the air and of wind currents towards the tropics. As previously stated in describing the positive current of power, being in the form of a right-angled triangle, with the angle of the triangle of the earth and one leg toward the North Pole, and one in the east at the equator, it will now be perceived that the greatest cold region of the earth cannot be either at the equator or at the poles, but must occupy places distant from the poles in the exact ratio of the difference in the power between the positive and negative currents of power and negative power of the force, and corresponding to the atmospheric lens of the earth.